What if a single container on your balcony could feed you all summer long? It sounds unlikely, but experienced gardeners prove it every year. The truth is, yield has almost nothing to do with the size of your yard. It has everything to do with which plants you choose. Most people look at a small balcony or a narrow porch and assume it's only good for a couple of herbs. But some vegetables are practically built for pots. They grow upward instead of outward. They keep producing for months instead of once. And they thrive in tight spaces where other crops give up. Today we are looking at 8 vegetables that can turn a few containers into a real ongoing food-producing system. Plants that climb fences and railings. Plants that regrow after every harvest. And one that home gardeners often call the single best container crop there is. By the end, you'll know exactly which crops give back the most for the least space, how to set each of them up for success, and the small habits, like consistent watering and regular harvesting, that keep them producing for months instead of weeks. If you could only grow one vegetable in a small space, most experienced gardeners would point to cherry tomatoes. They flower earlier than full-size tomatoes, set fruit more reliably, and keep producing steadily for months once they get going. A single healthy plant can produce hundreds of tomatoes over a season, which means 2 or 3 containers on a sunny balcony can supply fresh tomatoes almost daily through the warm months. They're also forgiving for beginners. Give them sun, steady watering, and decent soil, and the plant does most of the rest itself. One thing worth planning for early: put a stake or small trellis in while the plant is still young, because loaded branches get heavy fast and can snap without support. And build this habit early. The more often you pick ripe fruit, the more the plant keeps flowering and setting new tomatoes. So frequent harvesting directly extends your total yield. Cucumbers get skipped by gardeners who assume the vines need too much space. But that's only true if you let them sprawl across the ground. Give a cucumber a simple trellis or netting, and it climbs instead of spreading, turning a narrow strip of space into a productive vertical wall. Vertical growth also improves airflow, meaning fewer disease problems, and keeps fruit clean and off the damp soil. Cucumbers need consistent water and plenty of sunlight. And once the yellow flowers appear, fruit follows quickly. The real trick to keeping the harvest going is picking often. Cucumbers left too long on the vine signal the plant to slow down flowering. So daily checks during peak season pay off in a noticeably longer, more productive harvest window. Pole beans are often called the best proof that space was never really the limiting factor. Technique is, instead of spreading across the ground, they climb straight up a trellis or net, turning a small corner into what genuinely starts to look like a living wall of beans. Once established, they produce continuously for weeks, and the more you harvest, the more the plant keeps producing in return. A single well-set-up pot with a simple support structure can outproduce a much larger patch of ground-grown vegetables, simply because pole beans use vertical space that most plants never touch. The lesson pole beans teach better than almost anything else on this list. When you use vertical space well, a tiny footprint of soil stops being a real limitation and starts becoming an advantage. Where pole beans go up, bush beans stay compact. No trellis, no support structure, no extra setup required. They put all their energy into forming a dense little bush that just keeps producing beans through the season without asking much in return. They also mature fast, usually ready for a first harvest within about 2 months of sowing, giving beginners quick, visible, motivating results. Once the plant fills out, the harvest arrives in cycles. Pick a handful today, and a few days later there's already a fresh batch ready to pick again. For the best flavor and continued yield, harvest the pods while they're still young and tender rather than letting them mature fully and toughen up on the plant, since mature pods left in place signal the plant to slow down and stop producing as much. Lettuce proves that productivity isn't only about how big a plant grows, it's also about how many times you can harvest from the same plant. About a month after sowing, it's ready for its first cut, and instead of pulling the whole thing up, you snip the outer leaves and leave the center intact. New leaves keep coming for weeks, turning one small planting into a rolling, repeat harvest. Lettuce also needs very little space to be worth growing. Its roots stay shallow, so it does fine in a shallow container tucked onto a sunny windowsill or narrow balcony rail. The one thing to watch is heat. Lettuce turns bitter and bolts in high temperatures, so give it some afternoon shade once the weather turns hot and keep the soil consistently moist. For a truly continuous supply rather than one big harvest and then nothing, sow a fresh batch of seeds every couple of weeks throughout the season. Kale rewards patience with one of the longest harvest windows of any leafy green. Instead of cutting the whole plant, you remove the older leaves from the bottom, and the plant redirects its energy into producing fresh new leaves at the top, a cycle that can continue for months with decent care. It's also remarkably cold hardy, tolerating temperatures that would finish off more delicate greens, which extends the growing season on both ends. All it really needs is consistent moisture, good light, and an occasional feeding with compost or organic fertilizer to keep new growth coming steadily. The one rule that matters most: never strip too many leaves at once, leave the central growing tip and a healthy cluster of surrounding leaves untouched so the plant always has enough to keep photosynthesizing and producing. Zucchini has a reputation for producing so much that gardeners often end up giving the surplus away to neighbors, and that reputation is earned. Once flowering starts, fruit can go from bud to harvest size in just a few days, meaning even one productive plant can keep a household supplied all summer. The plants do take up noticeably more room than most other container crops on this list, spreading their broad leaves fairly wide, but the sheer volume of food from just one or two plants makes the extra space worth committing. The key to keeping the harvest coming steadily is picking the fruit young, around 15 to 20 centimeters, instead of letting it grow oversized on the vine, since early, regular picking signals the plant to keep flowering and setting new fruit rather than stopping. Bell peppers reward good, attentive care with a genuinely impressive harvest. A single well-tended plant can produce multiple waves of fruit from early summer all the way into fall. They're also surprisingly space-efficient for what they give back. A container around 25 to 30 centimeters deep in a sunny spot is usually enough for a healthy, productive plant. The main thing peppers need is steady, consistent watering. Letting the soil dry out completely between waterings, especially during hot stretches, is by far the most common mistake that slows their growth and reduces the final harvest. As the plant fills with fruit, the branches get noticeably heavier, so a small stake or support ring helps prevent wind damage or snap stems later in the season when the fruit load is heaviest. All 8 of these plants point back to the same underlying idea. The real limit in gardening was never actually the size of your available space. It was always how cleverly you used whatever space you did have. A balcony, a patio corner, or a simple row of pots along a fence can genuinely outproduce a much larger plot of ground once you deliberately choose crops that climb, regrow after cutting, or fruit continuously instead of giving you everything in one short burst and then quitting. Start with just 2 or 3 of the plants covered in this video, pay close attention to consistent watering and regular, frequent harvesting, and you'll likely be surprised at just how much real food a genuinely small space can give back over a single season. If this video was useful to you, take a moment to like it, subscribe for more videos like this one, and let us know in the comments which of these 8 vegetables you're growing or planning to grow this season.